Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we'll be speaking about consciousness architecture, plant and animal medicine, and the role of art in the evolution of consciousness with my incredible guest, Deus Fortier. Deus was actually part of the Catalyst event 2 weeks ago, which some of you may have seen. His work was featured at the live event. It was an incredible short video called Making Time, which he himself wrote. He created the poem for it, and it was an incredible video to watch. So please do make sure you check out his work at the end of this video, where I'm going to post all the relevant links. But for those of you who may not have heard of Deus's work, he is for over a decade of an experience in a rigorous study and practice of ancient wisdom teachings from around the world. Deus is a Kriya Yogi. Am I pronouncing that right? Kriya Yogi? I think so. Yeah, Kriya Yogi, transformative art facilitator, and full spectrum consciousness coach, who guides others in accessing and integrating their higher states of consciousness in our modern world, which I'm sure a lot of you can agree that we're all in much need of right now. So he is also, as I mentioned in the beginning, he's also a poet, a spoken word artist, and his work is the power of his work is really amazing, and I absolutely recommend for you guys to tune into some of his YouTube work if you haven't seen his previous videos before. He seamlessly weaves profound spiritual truths and wisdom into a mesmerizing, unforgettable experience that cuts right into the heart of the collective issues with a deeply inspired artistic flourish. So in today's talk, we're going to be engaging in some fascinating discussions about consciousness architecture, about plant and animal medicine, and how we can also use art through in our evolvement through this time that we're finding ourselves in. So art is definitely a very powerful form of expression, and I think nowadays a lot more people are starting to be more authentic, to speak their truth, to speak about everything that they're feeling negative about in this world, and all the things that have been done to our human society, to our humanity as a whole, and how we can basically best use this art form as a word of expression and speaking our truth. So I'm really excited to speak to Deus about all of these amazing topics today. Deus, welcome to Bridging the Realm. Thank you again for being here for the second time.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
How is everything with you, and where are you joining us from now?
I'm in Vancouver.
You're in Vancouver now. Okay,
Yeah.
so quite early for you guys there. But just before we came on live, we spoke about how obviously we've just passed Lionsgate and it's been pretty intense. How do you find everything from your side, from your point of view? Because I know you're quite sort of tapped into this world. So what have you been feeling for the last kind of few weeks, few months?
Few months, everything's picking up speed for sure.
Yeah.
Speed and intensity. As like my whole perspective of what's taking place right now in the world is that we're actually going through a global transformational shift right now, whereas a lot of us have been experiencing awakenings on a personal level for quite a few years now. It's actually transitioning into an entire global shift in consciousness. And if we look at this in the same trajectory, there's periods of upheaval and upset and confusion and intense emotional releases, energetic discharges. But this is happening on a global level right now. And so every individual is going through like these sine waves of peaks and valleys as this energetic ripple is going around the world. So I'm feeling that really strongly. And a lot of people that I'm connecting to, whether or not they consider themselves spiritual, are all going through these major transitions in their lives, being catalyzed by all of the geopolitical movements that are taking place right now. So even in the midst of all of the challenges and the uncertainty, I have a very positive frame and outlook on what it is that's taking place, because you have to go through that threshold of discomfort to actually emerge out the other side. And that's what I see happening right now, like with incredible speed and intensity.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm excited about it.
Oh God, yeah, me too. Yeah, things are definitely speeding up, and it's kind of like the transformation of the butterfly before you know, when it's in the cocoon sort of phase, that's kind of what I'm reminded of right now. This is sort of us going through the cocooning phase, well, through the almost transitioning into the butterfly, but just before that you have this process of, you know, this mutation that happens inside, and that's kind of what it feels like right now. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Wow. So what are kind of, well, before we get into that, tell me a bit about your journey. I know you mentioned it a little bit in at the Catalyst event, but for anyone who hasn't seen the video, tell me a bit about you and how did you start this whole work? I mean, I'm guessing you know, you have to have some sort of a questioning of, well, why am I here in this world? You know, what am I doing? And kind of that leads you into this spiritual field.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Who am
It never
I?
ends.
What is real? Daily thing.
Oh God.
But yeah, if I was to bring it back, there was one peak moment that really marked the change in trajectory in my life, but it was actually seeded all the way back from when I was a child, and just having this awareness that something wasn't right in the way that I was being taught I needed to live, like getting inserted into the school system and having to follow a very rigid structure of what I needed to learn and how I needed to behave. And I think a lot of people experience this, and none of the adults could really answer my questions. Like, why do we need to do things in this way? And none of them had any real answers. And so it created like this sense of frustration and a desire for something different. And so I isolated myself quite a lot as a child and would just contemplate things. Like, I have this memory of being a kid in my bed and looking at my hands and wondering who was moving my hands. And I could feel the hands moving, and I could decide when and how the hands were moving, but I wasn't identified with the actual act of the hands moving. And it created this curiosity, like, what is identity? How am I able to activate any kind of movement in this form? So this was present when I was really young as a child, and I would do these little consciousness experiments when I was alone in my bedroom. But as time went on, and you know, I was forced and kind of indoctrinated into the system, it really started weighing on me, and I was struggling with depression and loneliness. And when I was a teenager, I started getting into substances. I was pretty much an alcoholic when I was 18, 19 years old, working in a nightclub. But I had this really profound life-changing experience where I started getting involved in, well, at first I was exposed to The Secret. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with this concept, like the power to manifest by holding something in thought and believing it to be accomplished, and then following any intuitive impulses that arise as you move through the world, which will inevitably draw to you that experience. So I was given an introduction into that concept and started practicing it. And that kind of opened the gates to start exploring energy, like the feeling of energy, being able to actually see energy if you rub your hands and look up against the sky to see if you can see the energy between your hands. And then I started getting energy work, and it was like this door opened, and I was like this little kid. I'm like, anything is possible. Oh my goodness. And then I went backpacking in Guatemala. And this is really where the peak experience happened, where through a magical unfolding of events, I ended up at the top of this mountain on top of a Mayan temple during the time of a lunar eclipse. And we were all holding ceremony around there, cleaning the land. And I was getting energy work done at the top of this temple. And I had a full-blown, I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't an out-of-body experience, but with my eyes closed, my sense of self just began expanding infinitely. And it went beyond the solar system, and it started expanding out into the universe beyond what I could actually imagine to be possible. It just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And it reached this threshold where it started actually drawing up a little bit of fear, because I didn't really know what was happening. And in that moment, the person who was doing energy work on me, he accidentally touched my chest, and my consciousness just went sucked back into my body, and I opened my eyes, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I closed my eyes, and it started happening again. And long story short, when the energy session was over, I was standing on the temple, and I was looking around, and I could feel everything that I could see, as certainly as I could feel my body. Everything that I could see, I could feel. And in that moment, my whole view of reality just flipped upside down completely. And I didn't care anymore about anything having to do with money or career or relationship. I just needed to know who I really was, what reality really was. And so I sold everything that I owned. I said goodbye to my friends and my family, and I went to go try to be a monk through Self-Realization Fellowship, which is a Kriya Yoga organization founded by Paramahansa Yogananda. And obviously I didn't become a monk, but that changed the whole trajectory of my life, where the focal point, the pole star of everything that I was doing was seeking truth beyond the facade of this human life and the socioeconomic systems that we have put in place and the different programs that we're imprinted with as we grow up, to actually deconstruct all of those things and try to figure out what is true. And that became the focus for the next 10 years of my life, wandering around the world and studying teachings and practices and going into trainings just to discover for myself what it was that was true. And then that ended up leading into, how do I live in this world? This world that to me has a very lopsided value system and is functioning from a place of perpetual self-propagating delusion, which leads to a lot of distress in a lot of people's lives. How do I willfully engage in this kind of system in a way that actually contributes, but also sources some lasting sense of fulfillment for myself? So that kind of launched me into what it is that I'm doing right now.
Oh yeah, wow, that's a fascinating story. Thank you for saying that in such a detailed way. Wow, yeah, I can tell. I mean, I'm sure people who'll be watching this can totally relate to that. And I know myself, I definitely kind of went through this phase where I kind of went into depression and, asking these questions of, why am I here? What am I doing? What's the purpose? You're kind of trying to find meaning behind everything that you're doing. Otherwise, there's just this kind of a routine, robotic sort of way of going about life that just doesn't give you any purpose or meaning. And it's just so wrenching, right? But you mentioned before in your form about this idea about, you had this realization about how we're just programmed about the idea of work, and how you had this realization about joy and how we need to have joy in everything that we do. Tell me a bit about that specific moment in your life, because that seems pretty
Sure.
clinical of that.
Yeah, the lie of work is what I call that. I had this realization where when I was living at the ashram, they would have the schedule at the ashram is pretty much the same as a 9-to-5 job. Like, you wake up, you meditate in the morning, but then you have work periods, karma yoga periods, from like 8:30 in the morning to lunch. And you got like a half-hour meditation, you eat food, and then you have a work period in the afternoon. And this is Monday to Friday, and then you have Saturday and Sunday off, and they have different meditations and things planned. But it's basically the same as the Western schedule. The only difference is there's like built-in meditation into that. And so I was in this routine and kind of feeling really antsy and distressed by having to engage in the very thing that I was trying to get away from while I was in the ashram. But I had this really fascinating experience where, so I was working in the garden and I was just weeding the garden, and it got to the weekend where I had nothing planned, nothing that I had to do. And I had this desire, after I had done all the things I wanted to do, like meditate and go on a run and exercise, play some music, I had the desire to go into the garden and start weeding, just to give myself something to do and to really feel that process of weeding and connecting to the soil. And so by the time Monday came back and I was in the garden weeding, I had this realization that one of the programs that is inserted in us from a very young age is that we have to do something that we don't want to do in order to get the money to be able to not do anything for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Like this dream of retirement, where finally you're free from the burden of activity and you can just dwell in this perpetual place of lethargy forever and just like watch Netflix or play golf or sit on the beach forever. And that's where our happiness lies. But the truth is, for myself, that it's the times when I've been the most inactive, not actually engaging in life in some way, that I've been the most depressed. and the most lonely and the least satisfied with everything. And so as I'm weeding in the garden, I had this realization that that whole construct of work being a burden is a lie. It's a hijacking of the very thing that gives us the greatest sense of fulfillment in life, which is actively engaging in life as a source of fulfillment. And that the rest and the relaxation, those are what I call sources of rejuvenation. They replenish the system, bring you back to a state of fullness in body, mind, and spirit, so that you can re-engage from the fullness of your being. But it's the engagement that actually gives you fulfillment. The relaxation gives you rejuvenation, but the engagement gives you fulfillment, participating, contributing, creating something, having like a collaborative relationship with this amazing creative mystery that we're a part of actually gives us that sense of fulfillment that we're looking for. So this distorted program that work is a burden and not wanting going in there and like slogging our way through the day just so we can get to the end of it. And then at the end of the day, we sedate ourselves with everything that we can get, creates this cycle of distress in my system. And so when I saw this whole mechanism, the lie of work that is propagated in Western society, and how much joy I was feeling weeding a garden was so incredible that I literally just dropped my tools and I rolled back into the garden and I just started laughing and started repeating in myself, work, the concept of work is a lie. It's a hijacking of the thing that brings us the greatest sense of fulfillment, that brings me the greatest sense of fulfillment.
Yeah. Totally.
And so from there, it became a journey of, okay, how can I engage more fully from the fullness of who I am, instead of trying to like get away from everything and isolate myself and live on a mountaintop and achieve enlightenment? How can I engage more fully? Because I want more fulfillment. I want to experience that as a constant thing in my life, which was hard to accept for a while, because there's a strong program that like, I don't want to work. You know?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to put out constant effort in my life. I just want to like relax for a little bit.
Exactly.
But that's just a program.
Oh, totally. You nailed it. I can't agree more with you on that. And there's this thing, and for one, you know, we're programmed, this original program that is like, you know, you have to work, and you're so right. This idea, we have this constant idea that the more we don't like what we're doing, that means it's good, you know, the better it is, because that means we're actually working, we're making money. And there's this program in us that's like, oh, it's okay if you don't like your work, you know, that's just normal. But it's not, that's not normal, you know. It's this idea. And I've been thinking a lot about that as well. And it's kind of like, I've gotten to this point where I mean, I have no motivation if I'm doing something that I don't enjoy, or I see no sort of, you know, it's not really making a difference to anything. For example, I know I'm not, you know, not to attack anyone who works in retail, but when I used to work in retail, in shops, and you know, my supervisor would say things like, oh no, you have to fold the clothes this way or that way. And I would always think to myself, seriously, does that really make a difference to anybody's life, how I'm folding the clothes? Or, you know, it's little things like that. And you just think, I just want to make more of a difference, right? I think everyone gets to that point in their life at a certain point, and they just think, yeah, I want to do something that's more meaningful. So yeah, definitely kind of coming out of that program is really, really key, but very hard and very difficult, because we're so just attuned to that path. Yeah.
And it taps into a lot of different things that we're conditioned with. Have you ever heard of the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi? He wrote the book called Flow.
It rings a bell, but I've never actually read the book. No, I've heard the name.
Incredible book. He studies the flow state, and he conducted this massive study over decades. I couldn't give you the exact data points, but it's all in his book. Yeah. It's easy to find. It's just called Flow. And he's actually studying the set of circumstances and conditions to consciously elicit the flow state. And it's the flow state that people are really looking for in their life, like that. And all of us have experienced it to a degree, where you're participating in some sort of movement, some sort of exchange, but you're also connected to some kind of perfect intelligence that's flowing in and through the system, and your sense of time starts getting distorted. Like 5 minutes can happen, but actually an hour has passed, or vice versa. And only 5 minutes has passed, but it felt like an hour. Like these are qualities of the flow state. And he started deconstructing, okay, what is required for the flow state? And one of the things that is required for that state of fulfillment is the challenge that we're facing being proportionate to our level of skill. And just being the challenge being just higher than our level of skill. And what that does is it brings all our psychic energy and our attention into a singular direction, like a laser beam, where instead of having like a normal light bulb, like in a lamp, and all the light scattering in all different directions, a laser is focusing all of those light particles in the same direction, and it becomes extremely powerful. And when you do that, you start actually harnessing all of this energy that you're tapping into in a singular direction, and it opens up a channel. And through that channel, you start entering into a flow state where you actually start transcending your normal state of consciousness and tapping into something more. Yeah. So this flow state is something that you can get into regardless of what it is that you're doing. Yeah. And this is one of the things that the teachings of yoga started training me around, that this whole idea that work is a lie started deconstructing. Is that when we are tuned into like full presence in what it is that we're doing, and we're seeking to align ourselves with the highest form of creative offering that we can, like for example the folding of the clothes. An entry point into the flow state for that could be, okay, how perfectly and how quickly can I fold the most number of clothes possible? And you actually give yourself that task of trying to do it with as much precision as possible to increase the difficulty level and to harness all of your psychic attention into a singular direction, entering into the flow state, because inevitably that ripples out and contributes to the lives of others. Yeah. At the very least, your superiors, your managers who are like, oh my God, thank you so much for folding the clothes so perfectly. You make my life so much easier. Yeah. And then that ripples out to their friends and their family, and it ripples out through the entire collective. Yeah. Right? Like so many of us have this idea, like we need to change the world, and I need to create like a worldwide organization that's going to completely transform consciousness with this breakthrough system, and it's going to be incredible. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. In fact, truth is very, very simple. If we can live from the highest version of what is possible for us in any given moment, that is the transformative catalyst. There's nothing else that actually transforms reality than that mechanism. You're being fully present to and offering the fullness of who you are in that moment in service. And then that ripples out through the field in ways that we can't even imagine. Not just directly affecting the lives of the people who we're interacting with, but it seeds the field, the collective field, with a certain vibratory element that transforms the collective from the inside out in ways that we can't perceive from our human perception.
Wow, that's really powerful. It's sort of like the co-creative consciousness, isn't it? The global consciousness that we all connect to, which is kind of what we spoke about in the Catalyst event. So yeah, no, that was really powerfully put. And you're right, you're totally right. I think as long as you do it, like you put it, as long as you do it with joy, everything that you're doing, as long as it comes from your full joy, then that energy that you're putting out is just powerful. And like you said, it does affect everyone, no matter what you're doing. And actually I have a perfect example for that, and I'll never forget it because this person made such an impression on me. And so I remember once I was traveling in Costa Rica, and we went to this restaurant that was kind of, in the middle of nowhere, but the chef who was there, who was the owner of the place, it was a really nice place, but it was sort of like you had to search for it. And we basically went there. It was closed, but the chef opened it just especially for us, me and my friends who were there. And he just had this aura, this amazing energy. He was making jokes. He was actually cooking the food in front of us. He was like, oh, look, let me show you guys how I make it. And he was putting a bit of this, a bit of that. He's like, okay, now I'm going to put this. And we were just like, by the end of it, we didn't even care if we were hungry or not. It was about it was about the whole entertainment of how he made the food and how he presented it and the jokes and everything. So And he totally made, I remember this trip so well because of him. You know, he really made my trip because it was such a memorable experience, and it's something that you don't really expect, you know, because you normally go to the restaurant, you get served by the waiters and whatever, but it was just such an incredible experience. And that's, for me, that's such a good example of someone who loves what they're doing and who just puts their full joy and energy into something, and it really does create something incredible for the people who are around it. So yeah, definitely, that makes me think of that. Yeah, but no, it's
this
so
kind of ties into, I don't know if you have a direction that you want to go with this conversation, but
no
this ties into
whichever way we go.
yeah, where are we going?
Okay.
One of the things that I've been exposed to over the last 3 years in particular, since I've been facilitating plant medicine ceremonies, and recently as I've been transitioning into serving Bufo, which is 5-MeO DMT, is that a lot of people come into these medicine spaces and engage in some sort of healing journey, or become, you know, self-improvement addicts almost, or like constantly trying to find like, oh, what's wrong with me? How do I fix that? How do I get to this perfected state where nothing bad ever happens ever again in my internal environment or my external environment? And I was subject to this as well. I still am, to varying degrees, like trying to like get away from pain and to hang on to pleasure as like the primary driving forces on any type of healing or transformational journey. And so a lot of people come into these plant medicine spaces or transformational environments with this in mind. How do I attain like a perfect healed state, you know, where nothing is wrong anymore? And it's like this lofty goal over here that's so disconnected from the reality of what people are experiencing. And you find this in all the ancient wisdom teachings, that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Recognizing that there are infinite dimensions that we're exploring simultaneously in any given moment. There's our physical, there's our mental, there's our emotional, there's our spiritual selves, and then all of those things are reflected through our relationships and our life circumstances. So what does it even mean to get into a perfected state where nothing wrong ever happens, when you're constantly engaging in new and dynamic circumstances? Even the concept of that doesn't make sense. But when we go into these medicine spaces and we really understand and accept that there's nothing wrong, that there's actually nothing wrong, and we can just be fully present to whatever it is that is flowing in and through the system, then everything in our lives starts reconciling, because there's no longer a push or pull of, oh, I need to get rid of this thing and I need to hang on to this thing. And paradoxically, what ends up happening is kind of like a spiritual alchemy, where anything that is inhibiting or preventing the fullest expression of us in the moment naturally starts purging out of our system. Excess or accumulated or stored energy naturally starts discharging, and it is able to discharge because we are fully present to the experience, instead of trying to get to some kind of resolution. The resolution happens automatically when we're fully present to something. And this turns into our normal default state of moving in and through the world, where we're connected to this incredible source of intelligence that's flowing in and through the system in a receptive, responsive mechanism that is dynamic and intelligent in accordance to the specific circumstances that we're facing in life. As soon as we can start really wrapping our hearts and our minds around this concept, then the need to get anywhere dissolves, and we exponentially magnify our spiritual evolution. This is what, you know, Buddha is talking about. This is what Krishna and Christ are talking about being in this place of contentment or peace in the face of all of these movements, these transitions, these challenges, these joys. As Yogananda says, to stand unshakable amidst the crash of breaking worlds, recognizing that nothing is wrong, but to be fully present to the full experience of everything that's percolating through the system. This is how we start moving into a state of grace in the world, regardless of what we're doing. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber, it doesn't matter if you're a spiritual coach, it doesn't matter if you're working in retail. And I actually had this conversation with one of the monks before I came back to Canada. I was really distressed because I didn't know what to do once I came back. And I was asking him about like career paths and what I should do. And he looked at me and he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is how you do that thing. And I was like,
Really?
yeah, but what should I do?
That still doesn't answer my question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's well. I think sometimes it would be so much easier if someone just told me, I could just follow it. Yeah, it's definitely it puts a big responsibility on your shoulders to have to choose for yourself and
Right.
know that these decisions that you're making can ultimately lead you to something really good or something not so good. But again, it's never really so straightforward, is it? Because everything has its positive and its negatives at the same time. So
Yeah. But I loved what you just said, that it really comes down to personal agency and your free will choice. And this is part of the whole divine mechanism as well, is that your free will is never compromised. You actually making a decision is part of the whole evolutionary process, rather than just being handed a golden platter and be like, go in this direction. It's like knowing what you know now in this moment, what do you choose to do? And then how fully can you give yourself to that? And it's a big thing. And it's not something that we're actually encouraged to move into when we're children. It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? A fireman. Okay, great. Go through this thing, learn this thing, do this, don't do this, work in this building right now and become an employee and work from this time to this time and you get this amount of money and there you go. It's like a cut and paste career path. And this is kind of how we're trained to live in the world.
Yeah, totally.
It's like we're looking for that kind of structured cookie cutter placement because it frees us up from actually having to make any decisions of our own.
Yeah, totally. And in the end of our lives, we end up resenting it. Resenting the fact that we just believed what everyone told us in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I did everything they told me I was supposed to do. Why am I so unhappy?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people are finding themselves in this position now. And I think probably, in the last kind of 10 years, 20 years, a lot more people have now, begun doing sort of opening up their own businesses and kind of trying to do a lot more of what they actually want. So I think a lot more people are trying to escape that bubble of, you need to do this job or that job, or they're switching from one to another and then to another.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, I have this, I think it just relates perfectly to what we're just talking about. But I remember I went for a job interview once, and I switched a lot of different types of jobs. I worked, in restaurants, in retail, in all sorts of things. So I remember going to this interview once, and the lady looked at my CV, and she looked at me and she said, "So why have you had so many jobs?" And I said, "Because I like to try different things." And she was like, so do you really think that looks good on your CV? How do you think that, and she kind of just, and I was so taken aback, like, oh my God, I didn't even know what to say because I've never had anyone ask me that before. And I was just thinking, I don't even know how to respond to that because, I'm the type of person who likes to try different things. And I think a lot of people do that. But, is this thing of you need to stick to this job or to that job. And then because then you can climb the ladder and, and this whole thing. And I just thought, God, wow, really? I obviously didn't get the job, but I'm glad because why would you want to do one thing in your whole life? It's kind of like this whole idea of having the buffet in front of you. Life is a buffet, and are you only going to have ice cream or pizza? Why not mix it up? Why not have salad or something else, right? It's kind of like that for me. Yeah,
from a certain perspective, it's like, why wouldn't you want someone who has such a diversity of skill set and experience?
Exactly.
And a willingness to actually go beyond territory of what's known and actually explore beyond that. Creative thinker, A-type personality, willing to engage, like that's super ideal for a lot of different environments.
Yeah, but again, it's that kind of thing of, what's are your skills appreciated where you are, that kind of thing. I remember someone describing it as this metaphor of if you try to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then the fish would never really feel good enough, right? Because it's not meant to be in a tree. So is that kind of thing, it's finding finding where your skills and your talents can slot into, I guess, and what you can contribute, like what you said at the beginning, how you can give the most out of yourself in a specific thing or job or
Yeah, I was just thinking about that metaphor while you were talking. I was
really.
actually imagining a monkey swimming while
Yeah,
you
yeah,
were.
exactly. Yeah, that's quite a famous one. But I wanted to go back a bit because with this whole thing of, you know, people trying to improve themselves and doing the whole thing of, I need to get to this level of awareness, or I need to get rid of this trauma and that trauma and that trauma, which is so true, and everyone does that. And I'm definitely find myself caught up in that trap over and over again. But do you feel like a lot of people get caught in the trap of that kind of spiritual bypassing, almost, where you are so focused on improving and fixing yourself that you're forgetting about the actual journey and you needing to actually enjoy what you're doing in the current present moment, rather than trying to fix yourself and get to that level of perfection, like you said before?
Well, I think it's a natural part of everybody's, even the word evolution is kind of a misnomer. It's kind of giving the idea that there's like a linear trajectory of things, when that's not really the truth of how these kind of toroidal spirals of realization take place. But I think it's a natural stage, and it's inherent in our system. Like, we want to reach a place of homeostasis within our system, within our body, within our mind, within our psyche. And just to tap on really, really quick of what trauma is not the things that happened to us. Trauma is what we're carrying forward from that experience. It's painful past programming influencing our perception and experience in the present moment. It's actually distorting reality. So we're sourcing our perception from something unprocessed from the past that is then being projected onto what's happening in the present. And in the nervous system, that looks like an activated fight or flight response or a freeze response, which inhibits a person to effectively engage in the world, and not being able to actually discharge that system and regulate in a real way so that they can actually engage from a place of presence. This is what trauma is: painful past programming influencing perception of the present. And so it's natural to want to resolve those things because it's actually interfering with our ability to be present in the moment. Yeah. And the consequences of that are very visible in our lives. It shows up as physical disease or disharmony, mental loops, psychological conditions, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. All of these things are a result of that, as well as emotions, being very, very activated very, very easily by small things.
Yeah.
And, the phrase PTSD only started arising in the 80s following the Vietnam War, where they actually started studying people who were veterans who fought in that war, and the conditions that they were facing. They termed it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But the truth is, all of us have post-traumatic stress. Yeah. It might not have reached the threshold where we label it as a disorder, but everybody is carrying post-traumatic stress, being locked into the system. And just to give you a sense of how this actually shows up in the system, every mammal out in nature, when they get activated into a fight or flight response and all the blood is pumped into the extremities and adrenaline is shot through the system, their pain tolerance increases, their awareness, their sensory awareness is enhanced. They become like a superhero for a period of time. Yeah. As soon as there's no threat anymore and they come back to a state of relaxation, their body will twitch and shake, and they'll discharge excess energy in the system and come back to a place of homeostasis. Humans are the only mammal that does not do that. If an animal out in the wild, like a polar bear or a deer, doesn't discharge that excess energy, it will die. They've found this with animals, that if you tranquilize like a polar bear while it's trying to run away, as soon as it wakes up, it'll complete the movement of running away, and then it'll come back to its normal state. If it doesn't complete that movement, it will die. Oh, wow. But what happens with people, with humans, we actually contain and restrict and hold that energy because we need to maintain our composure in our work environment or with our friends or family, or maybe we just don't know how to process it, or it feels so inherently overwhelming that as a safety mechanism, we suppress and repress. That builds up in the system and creates disharmony, challenge, upset in a whole bunch of different ways throughout our lives. So it's natural to want to resolve that, because that's not our natural state.
Yeah.
That's something that we've accumulated over time.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of what consciousness architecture is pointing to. It's recognizing the different mechanisms that make up the human system, but removing identity from those things. You're not your body. You're not your mind. You're not your emotions. And everybody who's on any kind of spiritual path has heard these concepts. But when you actually understand what that means and how those systems function, what their function is, then you can start participating in their natural movements because they're intelligent. Emotions are intelligent. The traumatic system is intelligent. Like if there's a charge that is too much for the nervous system to handle, it goes into a freeze response to be able to protect the system so that it doesn't fry itself.
Wow.
But as we start increasing our capacity for feeling, our capacity for regulation, and building healthy relationships so that we can co-regulate, then these energetic charges that were too much for us like 5 years ago, maybe in like 2 hours ago, 2 hours a week, 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. However long ago, when the circumstances allow for it, that energy rises up to the surface of experience to then be discharged out of the system. But how does it show up? It shows up physically. It shows up emotionally. It shows up mentally. And if you can separate identity from it and simply allow yourself to rest into the experience and follow the spontaneous movements, being fully present to them, and then maybe contributing to those movements through certain breathing practices, certain somatic practices that actually aid in the discharge of that excess energy, then you can participate in the natural healing process that will happen naturally through the intelligence of your system. As soon as you start experiencing that, you come to realize more and more and more that your identity actually isn't placed in any of those things. Yeah. And it's really just stored energy that's being carried forward from past experiences. This is where you can start actually creating the kind of life that you want, recognizing that your value as a human, your sense of self-worth, of self-love, isn't dependent on your physical, mental, or emotional state, because those things are all transitory, and at least in part, they're sourced from the past. But you can be fully present to them, and you can start participating in them as your co-creative life process. As soon as you enter into that consciously, then it's no longer about the destination. It's not like, okay, I need to get to a perfect place of healing. It's how do I increase my skill and capacity of being fully present to what is happening in my life. That becomes the end goal, is being present in every moment of life with a greater skill and capacity to navigate it.
Wow. That's, now that I was totally zoned into that. Yeah, that's true. That's totally, I can see where you're coming from with that. And so what are the main, what are some of the, I guess it's about providing people with the tools, isn't it? The tools of getting rid of that trauma, or that sort of energy that is still blocking, is still stuck in our system, and kind of allowing it to leave, and then we can kind of focus into the present. So what are some of the tools that you, for example, provide some people with? Is that what body shaking is related to, kind of the release of this trauma in a physical way? I've never actually seen it. Oh, I have seen it, but I haven't actually experienced it myself. But that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, shaking is one really powerful way of doing it. So there's a few different categories here. There's increasing your feeling capacity is one, and then building up a toolkit and a skill set So all these things are what equips a person to be able to navigate effectively as a sovereign being. You know, so you want to increase your capacity to feel first and foremost, because a lot of things pass through this somatic emotional experience of life. Our emotions are basically our subjective interpretation of what's happening in the world. So we're never going to get away from our emotion. Even the emotion or the feeling of numbness is an intelligent felt response that you can actually sense into. Like, what does being numb feel like? What does feeling nothing feel like? So this is the first step, is to actually develop some kind of feeling practice to retrain the system that it's safe to feel, and that these things are dynamic and they actually move in and through the system on their own. That they don't actually require anything from you except your full presence and allowance for those things to exist. So that's the first thing, is the feeling practice. And then through that feeling practice, you can start engaging in different tools, using different tools. And as you apply the tools, you start building greater amounts of skill. So as you begin to feel into your system, you might notice that there's a little twitch that starts happening in your shoulder. And so you bring your attention like a laser beam to that area, and you start following those spontaneous movements, and you simply allow them to occur. There's different ways that you can activate this. You can activate this through different breathing practices. You can activate this through actual shaking. You can just shake for 10 minutes and eventually your body will start shaking you. Like the Osho dynamic meditation is one way that you can do this. There's also practices called TRE, or trauma release exercises, tension or trauma release exercises, which is basically finding areas in your body that naturally start shaking, just to stimulate that movement. So that's one thing that you can do, but you can also start using the other systems of your consciousness. And just to break this down very, very quickly, there's 4 components of consciousness that make up every human experience. There's an image, either like me looking at you right now on the screen, or if I'm thinking about something in the past, there's an image associated, or projecting what I want in the future, there's an image associated with that. There's a thought, there's some kind of narrative around that thing. There's an emotion that arises, however subtle or however intense. It's my subjective interpretation of the threat or safety of this thing and how it relates to me. And then there's a body sensation. So if I really pay attention, everything that I look at, like my blue water bottle, will elicit a very subtle change in my emotional and my physical and my mental state if I really concentrate on it, versus if I look at my phone, because this has a different association, which then my system responds to. If you really pay attention, everything shows up in these 4 categories: image, thought, emotion, body sensation. So with those 4 components, this is how you start actually applying different tools and building up a different skill set. As an example, if I start tuning into my feeling, just feeling my body right now, I can notice that there's tension in my lower back. If I bring my full awareness to that sensation, I can literally ask that sensation inside of myself. What goal do you want to realize for me in this manifestation? And I can listen to that sensation and respond with the first thing that arises: stability. Stability. Now I can use the 4 components of my consciousness, an image, to create in my mind a situation in which this goal of stability is fully realized. And I create that in my mind, and I insert myself in that experience, including all of my senses. See what I would see, hear what I would hear, feel what I would feel, and I experience that thing fully. So now I'm engaging all components of my consciousness to accomplish this task that this one sensation has for me. And I'm creating it. This creates neurological connections in the brain. It's creating emotional memory. It's restructuring my physical system, and it's changing my vibrational state simultaneously in a single moment of choosing to experience this thing fully. And so by doing this, I don't actually need to go through all of the relational circumstantial movements that would teach me that lesson. I'm finding that lesson within myself, activating it in my consciousness, feeling it fully, and bringing it to resolution and completion within myself in 5 minutes. This is what we have the ability to do as humans.
Yeah.
But people don't teach us these things. So this is the toolkit. This is the skill set. And then you can just start adding on it. Like, what does breath do? What do different breath work patterns do? Like, yoga has a lot of different breathing patterns to accomplish different things. Pranayama is usually a very controlled breath, directing energy in certain ways. You have the ability to do that. Whereas conscious connected breath, like pneumosomatics breath work, breath wave, holotropic breath work, quantum breath, all of these things are forms of conscious connected breath where you're connecting the inhale and the exhale fully. This is a way of regulating the nervous system. As you start doing that, trauma naturally starts discharging out of the body. So that accomplishes something very different from directing your energy in a particular way. You're actually relaxing fully so the energy can flow through itself. But for all of these things, for everything that I'm sharing, the foundation of it all is to resensitize your feeling capacity to relax into intentional intensity by that expanding feeling capacity. And then through this process of receptive responsiveness, of actually listening to those sensations, harvesting, what can I do in my life to live this more fully? And you find some practical action step. So there's the opening up to sensation. There's the relaxing into the full intensity of it. And then following that experience, knowing what I know now. What is one thing that I can do to live this more fully? You create that as a baseline for your human experience, and you create an evolutionary program in your system. So anytime a trigger shows up, automatically you go into feeling it fully. Instead of reacting behaviorally, you feel it fully. You relax into it. You allow it to move in and through the system. Eventually, instead of becoming a reactionary defensive response, it actually starts informing you. Like anger. What is happening with anger? A boundary has been crossed. Some sort of threat is being perceived. Is that threat true? Yes. What is the appropriate response to that to maintain boundary? That information is revealed as you are present with the emotion. Instead of just reacting, you actually sit with it to let that feeling inform you as it is discharging, so that you can respond appropriately. You feel, you relax into intentional intensity, knowing what I know now, what is one thing I can do to live this more fully? And then you do it.
Wow.
That creates a circuit. That creates a program where you're collaborating with your life experiences.
Wow, that's really powerful. And it's so simple. I mean, it's crazy how simple it is, and it makes such a huge difference, doesn't it? But yeah, that's really, really powerful. Wow. Well, I'm definitely going to use that in my daily life now. Thank you for that, Deuss.
You're welcome.
Wow. So is this what basically consciousness architecture is with what you work at? You kind of interweave all of those different types of techniques and tools and the layers of consciousness.
Consciousness architecture is a full spectrum exploration of being a spiritual being having a human experience. So it's understanding all of the mechanisms that make up the human system, the physical, the mental, the emotional realms, understanding how they work, including subconscious reprogramming, including language as our ability to actually transmit packets of information and code information so that we can absorb it, to expanding into feeling practices, to being able to envision and activate intention consciously, to be able to access witness consciousness states beyond human normal human consciousness. All of these things are about consciousness architecture, which is really just about reclaiming your power as a limitless creator in this world, instead of being subject to the powers that are imposing themselves upon your system, whether they be internally driven, like the addiction patterns that a lot of people are in, that are actually sourced from an internal structure, or some sort of external structure, like having a really unhealthy relationship or constantly getting into unhealthy relationships. Like, why is that pattern there? Understanding those things so that you can release anything that no longer serves and activate the highest version of what it is that you feel called to embody as a virtuous spiritual being of limitless potential. This is consciousness architecture, reclaiming your sovereignty as a creative being.
Oh, wow. That's really, really interesting. So let me ask you this, where do you think this, for example, when you were saying that we kind of forget to really release this energy at the time of, say, when something negative happens, right? With the flight or flight response. Is it sort of from childhood that we are just programmed into this? We experience something, but we don't allow ourselves to feel it. So we just hold everything in, and it's this energy that's kind of like there, you know? Is that, do you think I'm guessing it is mostly from childhood that we kind of learn to do that, and we just continue with every pattern, every new experience, we just hold everything in, and it's kind of like this energy that accumulates.
Yeah, the core programs definitely happen when we're children, and it even happens earlier than when we're children. Like when we're in the womb, we're already absorbing and creating basic foundational programs. But it's built in, you know, from the strongest ones are from the youngest age. And then they just get reinforced through familial or through societal conditioning. Because what are we taught? We're taught that we're only allowed to express certain emotions. And certain, you know, if we're going to break this down in a very simplistic way, girls are taught that certain emotions are celebrated and allowed, and boys are taught certain emotions are celebrated and allowed, and other ones are not. Other ones are punished, you know, depending on who we are and what circumstances we're in. But as children, none of that makes sense to us because we don't control our emotions. They just naturally arise in response to what's happening around us. And so if something is stimulating an emotional response and then we're punished for that thing, it creates a lot of confusion within the system. And then it intelligently responds by shutting down certain aspects and developing compensatory behaviors or actions. So I realized that if I'm people pleaser and I smile in a certain way, it like makes the adults smile and laugh and they really love me. I'm going to start doing that more and more and more. Whereas, you know, for another child, maybe if they're very, very quiet and they don't impose themselves on the adults, they get rewards or they get acknowledged for being a good kid, you know? And so they start adopting that type of behavior tactic. So, and it's all just to receive love, just to receive love and acceptance. But it's an intelligent response to whatever it is that we're exposed to. It's a defense mechanism, but it's also to just receive as much love as possible. Because to a child, love is life. And when you're in a place of being dependent on adults, if you are rejected as a child, you die. On an evolutionary level, you need that bonding with the authority figures that you're with. So you'll do anything. You'll do anything to receive that safety and that love. So I really just want to emphasize that there's nothing wrong with any of these behaviors or these responses. These are very, very intelligent responses to a time that we needed them as children. But part of reclaiming the sovereignty is recognizing that those programs don't actually serve us anymore, that we have the capacity to feel those things. We have the capacity to choose something different. We are mature and we've grown to the place now where we can reclaim that sovereignty and take back those parts of ourselves that we buried away because they weren't compatible with the dominant mind states of the people we were surrounded by. This is the healing path. It's the reclaiming of aspects of ourselves that we've stuffed away because we needed to survive.
Yeah.
To bring those back and to become a full spectrum human being once again.
Wow, that's powerful. Full spectrum human being. Yeah, definitely. So tell me, how does let's talk about plant medicine a bit. I know you mentioned it before. Where does this come into it, and how from your point of view, how does plant medicine help us to heal some of those aspects of us and to integrate?
Oh, in every way.
Yeah. Which ones? Which ones have you tried, and what was it like? Your first experiences?
The first, well, I wouldn't even say I worked with. I used mushrooms recreationally when I was younger. I'd say my first ceremonial, like intentional plant medicine experience was with ayahuasca.
Mm.
And that was really powerful for me. I was already on the trajectory of becoming a monk.
Mm.
And I was invited to a ceremony by somebody who is actually a part of the meditation center that I was in, which was the only reason why I went, because I trusted him. And he was a Kriya Yogi and an amazing man. So anyway, I went to the ceremony and I had an experience of communicating directly with the spirit of ayahuasca.
Wow.
And for people who have never sat, this is a very common experience. Like, I'm not unique in that happening, but people who have never sat in a plant medicine ceremony like this before often kind of discredit those experiences. Like, yeah, right, you had a communication with that spirit. But it's a very tangible experience where plant medicines, one of the names for them is the great revealers. And so it's like inviting in a super intelligent being into your field that interfaces with the mechanisms of the human system. So it interacts with your thoughts, with your emotions, with your body sensations, and with the images that show up in your mind. These are the different dimensions of your being that teacher will move in and through to optimize. So if there's energy being stored in the body, it can purge it out like ayahuasca does. But that's not just physical. Maybe it's attached to a memory, which is like a deep emotion of like guilt, and it will bring it to the surface. But it's also bolstering your feeling capacity. It's like flowing in and through you to increase your feeling capacity and to hold you as you go into something that might be too overwhelming if you were by yourself. So you have something within you that is bolstering your feeling capacity and drawing things up to be released and optimizing the entire psychosomatic, emotional, spiritual system.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it reveals to you the links between these things. So it shows you the connection points between your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual beings. And in that discharge, it starts optimizing your system to bring you back to that original state of wholeness. Now, one of the main dangers in plant medicine ceremonies is not preparing properly and not integrating properly. And then while you're experiencing it, not being held properly. These are the three key components. You can break it down into set and setting, going in with the proper intention, being with the right people in the right environment. Those are very, very important. One thing that's not spoken about very much is proper integration of the experience, which then ties back into what we were saying before. Knowing what I know now, what is one thing that I can do to live this more fully in my life? Because it's not just it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. No plant medicine will do the work for you. It will help you in doing your own work. And then it is our responsibility to live that moving forward in our lives. So it doesn't really matter what medicine that you're working with. They all do slightly different things within the construct of consciousness, but they all dwell in the same kind of territory where they're interfacing with the mechanisms of the human system to release things that no longer serve, to reveal things that were previously hidden, and to bring you back to an optimized state in accordance to your current trajectory in life. And then our work is to prepare to approach them with respect and reverence, with the proper intentions, and then following the experience to integrate and to apply it in our lives so that we can actually become living representatives of the healing and the transformation that took place in that one singular experience.
Yes, totally. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, isn't it? Because I mean, at some point, ayahuasca was really, really big, and so many people traveling to Peru to do it, and it was like such a cool thing, and it still is. But I definitely noticed that as well. A lot of people were doing it for the experience, and to see all these incredible things, which a lot of well, sometimes you actually don't get to see. Sometimes you get to see some pretty scary things, and that's the part where I think a lot of people are not prepared for, and then that's where it can kind of go off the rails, and like you said, it's not integrated.
Yeah, and how could they prepare? Like we're not prepared as a culture. Like they don't teach us about these things as we grow up. We don't have connection to elders and lineages of beings who actually worked with these medicines. Sometimes we do, but even that's not a guarantee. There are people who are of these traditions. Many of them are actually very much out of integrity or are utilizing dark magic or forms of manipulation to receive things because they're actually aware of the different forces. And it's the same thing in Western society. Like this is what advertising is. It's attaching an image with some kind of jingle and then attaching that thing to some sort of value that you hold. Like if you use this toothpaste, your teeth will be so bright that everybody will love you. It's like attaching itself to this human need through an image and something that's going to embed itself in your consciousness to lure you in a direction. Same thing can happen in these plant medicine spaces. Not everybody who's holding space, even if they're of a lineage, has pure intentions. So how do you actually prepare for this experience? It's a really complex, very, very sensitive realm. And not a lot of people are actually holding a good space, recognizing the magnitude of what can happen in these realms, especially the people who are going in to participate for the first time. There's a lot of spiritual tourists who are going in to use these medicines. And maybe that's actually what they need to do at that particular stage of their journey, but to make sure that they're safe in that exploration, and maybe they receive a very humbling experience. Maybe they receive a really beautiful, expansive, loving experience. Maybe that's what they needed through their journey, and they feel complete through that. So again, there's nothing right or wrong about, there's nothing right or wrong in general, but there's consequence. There's consequence for certain things. So being able to approach it with clear intent in the proper environment, with the proper facilitator that you feel safe with, and then applying whatever it is that comes through for you, carrying forward in your life is the real purpose of these things. Because they're not, again, they're not a panacea. They're teachers. They're there to actually reveal to us something about ourselves so that we can carry that forward in our lives. It's like if you were to go to any other teacher, you wouldn't ask your teacher to live your life for you or to heal all of your problems for you. They will teach you how to do that. And then if you are a good student, you take that and you apply it, and then you maybe come back with your harvest. Oh, I learned this thing, and I learned this thing, and I learned this thing, and now I'm feeling this, and I understand this thing that I previously couldn't see before. I'm ready for my next lesson. Now, this is the proper way to approach them as teachers.
Yes, totally. And that's why I think the touristy ones, the ones that they advertise, you can just go in and do one session and then you're done, never really works, because like you said, we need to kind of we need to have that space to actually think about what we saw, what we experienced, and to have the ability to integrate it and to speak to someone about it who is more knowledgeable about this kind of stuff and how it works. So yeah, totally. My rule is with that is always go with someone who's recommended by someone else, or someone who I trust, otherwise no. That's my rule.
Very sensitive spaces. And one of the common experiences is total discombobulation. Like one of the things that mushrooms does, which is incredible, and they're studying this. There's lots of studies around mushrooms, but there's this mechanism in your brain called the default mode network. Have you ever heard of this before?
I've heard of it.
So the default mode network is active pretty much all the time when you're conscious and you're engaging in some form of activity. It is the normal channels that are flowing that influence your absorption of information, what's getting brought to your conscious awareness, and influencing your sense making. It's how you actually absorb and interpret information and then choose to behave. It's being streamlined through the default mode network. It influences what you perceive to be possible, and it influences how you filter memories from the past.
Okay. Yeah.
And so one of the things that plant medicines do, mushrooms in particular, is it deactivates the default mode network and it redistributes brain activity throughout the entire brain, and it creates what's called hypercoherence.
Yeah.
So areas of your brain that normally aren't active and communicating will start communicating.
Yeah.
And one of the things that this does within the conscious mind is you become aware of all of this information that was previously not accessible to your conscious awareness. And it deconstructs your regular way of making sense of things. And those two things combined means you're plunged into this incredibly intense, incredibly vast ocean of sensory information through the physical, mental, and emotional planes. And your ability to comprehend it is dramatically reduced because you can't compartmentalize it in an analytical way as you normally would be able to. So you're simply being exposed to this vast amount of information, and your ability to actually analyze it is dramatically reduced, which is a very confusing experience.
Yeah.
Because you might not be able to figure out where you are, who you are, and what's happening.
Yeah.
This is why the space and the facilitator is so important. Somebody who understands that deconstruction process. Because in doing so, just as with your body, if you allow it to relax and it automatically starts discharging, the same thing is happening on a psychosomatic level and neurological level. It's severing ties that no longer serve and actually restructuring your brain in a very powerful way, so that when cohesion reforms itself, you've actually absorbed and perceived and discharged incredible amounts of information. And when you recapitulate your identity, you're a new person. You're literally a new person when that experience comes to completion, which is why the integration is so important. Because it's not like those old programs simply vanish, although that's possible too. Spontaneous healing does happen. The memory of those things, the inertia of those things still exists. And so it's like getting popped out of a mold and reformed into a new structure. If you come out of that experience and you don't integrate and solidify this new structure, which is still kind of malleable, you can like stuff it back into that old mold again, and it will reform itself back into the old patterned ways of being, but maybe with a little more upset and a little less hope. Because the transformation didn't actually stick, and now you've defaulted back into the old coping mechanisms, and they've re-solidified themselves. They got their hooks in you again, and maybe they're in there even just a little bit stronger because they recognize that they're being threatened. Right? So you're becoming very, very malleable, and so you want to consciously choose some sort of proactive behaviors following the experience to really solidify the new identity that is activated through those experiences.
Yeah, almost like creating these new pathways that now this new information can flow into. And
yeah, exactly.
And would you say that's probably why, if you just continue to go from one retreat to the next, to the next, to the next, it might not also be so good because you don't have that space in between to actually have the time to integrate and think about what you've just went through. Yeah.
And even on a nervous system level, if you don't have the proper time to integrate that, those experiences can actually start accumulating within the system and cause different kinds of distresses within the system. But integration is also a skill. There's two components to it. One is the capacity of your system to actually replenish and recover. And you can do different things to help aid that, like radical self-care, yoga, acupuncture, certain herbs will really help replenish the system depending on what plant medicine you're working with. So there's different like nutritional and health things that you can do to ease that process.
Yeah.
But your system is also developing a greater capacity to rejuvenate. It's like having a 50-watt light bulb and you're shooting like 100 watts through it. It like kind of fries the system at first, but eventually your capacity actually grows to 100 watts. And then maybe, you know, the charge actually increases and it goes up to like 120 watts through your 100-watt light bulb. But you're starting to actually develop the skill to expand your capacity for voltage. So you actually get better at that. And as long as you continue to follow through and implement the action steps, then you start developing that as a skill. So integration can actually start happening much faster than it was for the initial experiences. Yeah. So just as a protocol, myself and my partner, if somebody's coming to sit with us for the first time, we have a minimum of 3 months between their first ceremony and their next ceremony so that they have proper time to integrate. And we give them access to a community of people. We have supplementary experiences like breath work or sound journey that we have them give them access to. I also have a coaching program for men to help them build a toolkit and a skill set like what we've been talking about, so that they actually learn the skill of integration before they dive back into those spaces. And as they start working that, then the potential is there for them to actually start sitting more regularly. If it's something that they feel called to do, if they're actually applying the lesson and they're developing the capacity to integrate, then it can be very, very helpful. But if you have too many experiences too quickly, you're not digesting, you're not recovering, you're not integrating, it can actually start causing distress to the system.
Yeah. No, wow, that totally makes sense. And I would definitely agree with the idea that we do need to have that space to integrate and just to allow everything to sink in. Because like you said, a lot of the times we go through these experiences, which are incredible, and then we just slip back into our regular way of doing everything. So that's, that's the worst.
Yeah, it's easy to do, especially in our world, you know, because it's like you got to go back to your job and you still got all your relationships. So you got all these things that are trying to like pull you back into your old way of being. So it's really important to find a community, some sort of support network to be able to hold you as you go through that transformation process. But fortunately, like this is going all the way back to the very beginning of this conversation, I see this happening around the world right now. There's so many people going through these huge reevaluations of their lives. So having these kind of conversations, like I'm reevaluating my life right now. This is becoming a very common conversation, which is why it's such a potent time of transformation in our world. It's so exciting that people are actually opening up to have these conversations of creating a different life for themselves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, completely. And so I know you have to go. We've been here a little bit over time. Do you have to go a specific time, or can you?
I have a call at noon, so I still got a few minutes.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to ask a little bit about using art as a form of, you know, expressing ourselves. And I know you do that really well with your poetry and writing. Tell me a little bit about that and why it's so important right now, especially to use this in our lives.
Sure. Thanks for asking about that. I actually forgot about that as one of the key points.
Got carried away with everything else.
Yeah. So just a little bit of background about this. I got certified in a process called Transformative Art back in 2016. I had studied with this woman, amazing teacher, Dana Lynn Anderson, at 2 separate occasions, once in 2014 and again in 2016. And Dana she's got a PhD in consciousness studies from Johns Hopkins University, which I didn't know you could do. If I knew that back when I was 20, that's probably what I would have done. But she's also a Kriya Yogi. She's been practicing for decades now, and she's a phenomenal artist. And she's taken these 3 pillars: consciousness studies, Kriya Yoga, and her skill as an artist. And she's created this really cohesive modality, or just applied it in a creative way in what she calls transformative art. So transformative art is really a way to organically dissolve the fears, the inhibitions, the blind spots, and the blockages in our system, and to reawaken our capacity for authentic expression in everything that we do. A lot of our expression as Westerners is limited to words. And we've kind of shut down our capacities for movement and sounding and paint and the sloppiness and the spontaneity of creative expression that's so alive in children. A lot of adults don't have that anymore. We've like really zoned into, okay, how do I do this right?
Yeah.
Perfectly. I don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want anyone to make fun of me. Don't look at me. And so we kind of shut down our creative faculties. And what that does is it really, really inhibits, like what we're talking about before, the full spectrum of the human. Now, all of the artistic modalities, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sculpting, painting, singing, dancing, all of those things are forms of communicating. They're intimate exchanges with some sort of internal experience flowing in and out of the system in an expressive way, which then creates a connection point for relationship.
Wow.
So it's building a relationship with our inner landscape, but it's also creating avenues of connection with other beings outside of us, because now you have this reference point. So transformative art, just to give you an example, you might start with some music and you allow your feeling in response to the music to guide your movements. So instead of me deciding I want to go like this, I'm going to listen to the music and I'm going to let the music move my body in response. And then maybe after 5 minutes, I transition to a piece of paper and I let that energy express itself through color. Whatever color, crayons, paints, doesn't matter. You just express it through color and you just use as many pieces of paper as you want, maybe transition back into movement and then back into coloring again. After that process comes to completion, you now have this sheet of paper that has a visual representation of some sort of living energy that you were communing with, that another person can witness. Now you can start using that energy. So I could show you the picture and you could look at this picture and let the feelings that picture evokes in you move your body, make a sound, and have me witness you experience this thing that I was connected to now flowing through your system. So these are non-verbal forms of communicating and to opening and expanding our feeling capacity and our expressive capacity. The natural result of this is your inhibitions start dissolving, you start accessing greater levels of joy, and you start getting really profound insights about your emotions, about what they actually mean to you and how they want to move and express and what they reveal to you. Like all of this, art therapy is not a new thing. We already know that if we can tap into a spontaneous creative expression without thought of doing it good or bad, whatever it is that's being held in the system subconsciously will make it through in some way, shape, or form through the expression. This is also connected to, ancient shamanic practices. All of the wisdom keepers, the storytellers, the rishis, the ancient sages, they were artists. They were storytellers. They would communicate through song. They would dance different beings. They would open up the incredible magnitude of their being to include all the facets of reality to flow through their form. And this is how they came to know and transmit truths that exist beyond language. They would actually become and embody these things, to merge with them and to allow them to flow in and through the system. And as we do this, we realize that this is what's happening all the time. Every single one of us is channeling something that is not who we really are, but we have a relationship with it. I have a relationship with sadness. I have a relationship with anger. I have a relationship with jealousy. I have a relationship with joy. Who I am expands infinitely beyond any of those individual things, but includes those in a very intimate exchange. And we do this, it's all connected. We start reconnecting to the fullest expression of who we are, because the emphasis starts getting taken away from doing something right or doing something wrong.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what keeps us stuck, isn't it? It's like, no, I need to do this right. I need to do this way or that way. It's just the whole creativity just goes out of the window.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
This
Oh,
is one
wow.
of the reasons why I moved into this, was because I was a high performer when I was a child, and really shied away from artistic expression because I got a lot of my validation from doing things well.
Mm,
And so when I was in art class, I would like look for something to draw. Like I would draw a shoe, because if I duplicated it really well, people are like, wow, you did such a great job. You're such an amazing artist. And I'm like, yay. But anytime I needed to do something, of my own,
yeah.
like abstract, it was really, really challenging for me to do, because I was so terrified of it not being
Yeah.
accepted or not being correct. So
Mm,
this is a big part of my learning process, of just letting myself be sloppy and make weird noises, and to like move in very strange ways that didn't look very good, or maybe even looked kind of like violent or like gross, just to like try those things on and open up those things again, and to witness other people doing that too, to really like loosen the stranglehold that so many people put on themselves around inhibiting their expression.
oh God, yes, totally. I can totally relate to that. And there's always this perfectionism, isn't it? It's just this need to be perfect, to be praised all the time, to please others all the time. And there's this again, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So I think a lot of people can relate to that,
yeah,
especially in the Western world. In the other countries, not so much. But I think in the Western world, we have this idea of we have to be earn top. We have to be at the top of the ladder and earn the top marks in school. So yeah, this whole idea definitely gets the best of us.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really like the kind of structure that we've built in our society. You have to succeed in order to be valuable. And in order to succeed, you need to follow these rules. And in order to follow these rules, you need to do this good, and you need to not do this because it's bad.
yeah.
And you
And now it's about
enforce that on children, and it just like completely shuts them down and creates all these fear programs, and they're like, oh my God, how do I survive in this really crazy world, and why are things this way? And all of the adults are like, because.
exactly, yeah. Oh yes. Well, I think we've definitely reached this point where a lot of people are questioning that now, and yeah, starting to realize this old way needs to be left behind, and now we need to create a new path,
Yeah,
which you are doing brilliantly with all of your work. And yeah, it just sounds amazing what you guys are doing. So thank you
thank
so much
you.
for
You
sharing that.
too. You're building the bridges.
Building the bridges, yeah. I hope so. I hope so. But Deuss, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such an interesting talk. I got so much out of it, and definitely so much to think about, and again integrate, in the kind of into our own lives. So I know there's a lot of really golden nuggets there. Well, we don't really have time for the somatic scanning, but can you just describe it quickly what it is? I know you mentioned it earlier.
I can lead you through it in 3 minutes if you got time.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Doesn't have to take very long. So the somatic scan is a very baseline foundational feeling practice that really evolves as time goes on. You can do this practice and carve out incredible depth.
Okay, brilliant.
So you just find a comfortable seat, relaxing your body as much as possible, letting gravity hold you up. Feeling your feet on the ground. Feeling the natural rhythms of your breath. And with your felt sense, just do a gentle scan through your body from the tips of your toes all through your body to the top of your head, seeing how detailed you can be in your sensory awareness. So seeing if you can feel the surface of your skin all the way through the tissues, the muscles, the tendons, all the way into the bones. See how detailed your sensation can be as you scan through your body from your feet to the top of your head.
Okay.
And from this place, bring your awareness to your entire body as a whole. Feel your entire body fully. And from this full body awareness, find the strongest sensation that you're aware of. And bring your full attention to that one sensation.
Okay.
Now, once you got it, just within yourself, answer these questions. What shape is it? How big is it? What size is it? What color is it? How heavy is it in pounds if you had to give it a weight? What's its texture? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it smooth? What's its texture? How old is it in years? And how strong is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Now that you're connected with all of these different qualities of this one sensation that you're observing, simply allow yourself to feel that feeling fully for about 60 seconds, allowing any shifts or changes to occur naturally. Maybe it grows in intensity, maybe it shrinks, maybe it moves locations, maybe it changes entirely. Just allow any and all natural movements to occur as you observe this sensation fully. Gently releasing your awareness from that sensation with a full inhale and a sighing exhale. Inhale now. Sighing exhale. Taking in your full body awareness one more time. Just noticing any shifts or changes in your overall energy or sensation since before the somatic scan. And whenever you're ready, gently opening your eyes.
Wow. I feel a lot more relaxed now, I have to say. Wow, that was amazing how just such a simple thing can have such a huge effect on your body, and just kind of getting it into that relaxed state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe one note on this is there's a few additional elements that have been added into this from transformative art and from one of my teachers, Satyan Raja. But this feeling practice in its simplest form, I was first exposed to by David R. Hawkins. He's written a lot of amazing books, including Power versus Force, which is his most well-known one. But the book Pathway to Surrender, he speaks about this practice that will lead you all the way up the vibrational scale to enlightenment. And all it is sitting down for half an hour every day and allowing yourself to feel your feelings fully without trying to shift, change, or control anything. You just allow yourself to feel fully for half an hour every day. And that's his practice for going all the way to enlightenment.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I can, well, yeah, because they say when you meditate, you kind of connect with that bigger part of yourself, isn't it? Or with source, with God, you connect with that bigger energy. So I can see how that would happen. Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Well, that was definitely something for everyone to use who's watching this. So thank you so much, Deuss. And so people can find you on Facebook, facebook.com/Deus Fortier, and also instagram.com Deus Fortier, and your website, www.deusfortier.com. You mentioned that you and your partner do retreats or something in the area that you're...
So we're based out of Vancouver. We do a variety of things. We have plant medicine ceremonies that we facilitate. We're also breathwork practitioners, and we're both coaches as well.
Yeah. And you coach both men and women, or just men? I think you mentioned that you have...
I have female clients as well, but I have a master class that's specifically for men. And my partner is not only a holistic health coach, but she's also a microdosing coach, and she specializes in working with women.
Wow, amazing. Oh, brilliant. Well, yes, amazing. And I'm also going to paste the links of your YouTube below in the description. So for anyone who's interested in checking out some of Deuss's poetry, which is incredible, again, I'll definitely recommend it. Then definitely check out the links. So Deuss, again, thank you so much. Any last words for anyone listening?
I love you.
Brilliant.
Thank you for doing the good work of living a good life. And thank you, Desi, so much for having me on this. This was a lot of fun, and I really enjoy the energy that you bring and the work that you're putting out, the effort that you're putting to actually create these kinds of conversations. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.